The fateful knock. The knock on the door came just as I was pouring my morning coffee. Sharp, decisive, the kind of knock that didn't allow for patience, but demanded immediate attention. I froze, my heart pounding as I stared at the door. No one came by at this hour, especially not after a hellish week like this one. Setting the coffee cup on the kitchen counter, I gently wiped my hands on my soft robe, as if trying to erase the tremor rising within me. I didn't want to open the door. Not today. Not after everything had shattered so cruelly and humiliatingly. But still, I moved forward, each step stretching the anxiety further, every breath heavier, as my fingers touched the cold doorknob. As the door cracked open, I couldn't believe my eyes. Standing right on my doorstep was Ashley, she, with that triumphant smile, her blonde hair glowing perfectly, as if she had just stepped out of a magazine photo shoot. Ashley, the woman Mark had left me for, the one he flaunted in public while I struggled to piece together the fragments of my life. Before I could say a word, she spoke, her voice sweet but laced with venom. "You might want to start packing, Sarah. We'll be moving in soon." Her words pierced me like a cold, sharp blade. Before I could grasp their full meaning, she raised a neatly folded piece of paper, her expression smug as if she held a winning lottery ticket. A contract, a deed, or perhaps anything Mark had arranged to push me out of the house I once called home. "Mark didn't tell you?" She arched an eyebrow, her eyes glinting with cruel delight. "This house is his now. If I were you, I'd start packing sooner rather than later because we could move in at any time." My heart sank, a cold rush filling my chest. But it wasn't panic or anger as I had expected. Instead, a chilling, quiet calm wrapped around me, a terrifying stillness. I let a faint smile curl at the corner of my lips, a smile I knew she couldn't understand. Because I knew something she didn't. I was not alone. Standing just behind her, out of her arrogant line of sight, was my attorney. I had been preparing for this moment for a long time. And this was only the beginning of the game. Entering the game, I took a step back, my eyes never leaving Ashley's smug face. She truly believed she had won. That with just a piece of paper and a few condescending words, she could push me out of the home I had built with all my love and hope. She had no idea that, right at this moment, she was walking straight into the trap I had carefully set. I loosened my grip on the doorknob, hiding the tremor still coiling inside me. Slowly, I tilted my head, letting a strand of hair fall over my eyes, masking the cold gleam in them that she could not see. "Come in," I said softly, almost warmly. "If you're planning to start a new life here, you might as well take a look around." Ashley's eyes flickered with a brief surprise. I saw the hesitation flash across her face, but she recovered quickly. "I suppose," she sneered, lips curling with arrogance. The click of her high heels on the hardwood floors I had personally chosen echoed through the house. Each step was like a knife, carving into the shattered remains of my past. But I didn't waver, because I knew I was in control of this game. Ashley stood in the living room, her eyes scrutinizing every corner as if she had owned the place for years. She turned back to me, her blue eyes sparkling with the satisfaction of a conqueror. "I have to admit, your taste isn't terrible. Of course, I'll have to make a few changes, make it truly mine." I chuckled softly, not out of amusement, but because I had grown so used to these cheap provocations. I moved slowly, standing tall, my gaze unflinching. "Oh, I'm sure you'll want to change a lot." I emphasized every word, my eyes locking onto hers with a sharpness she failed to notice. "But before you decide to paint the walls or change the carpets, maybe you should hear a few things." The door behind her clicked shut, the lock turning with a deliberate sound. Ashley stiffened, her shoulders trembling, her confidence wavering like a candle in a storm. "You forgot to greet my friend." I gestured behind her, where my lawyer stood, his face calm, a thick folder in his hands. Ashley spun around, her eyes wide with disbelief. The color drained from her face as she realized this game was far more complex than she had imagined. I crossed my arms, leaning against the armrest, a serene smile playing on my lips. "Welcome to the real game, Ashley." I saw her perfectly manicured hands begin to tremble, the paper she once held with such pride, now a fragile, crumpled mess. The match had only just begun, and I was ready for every move. The tables turned. The room seemed to shrink as silence wrapped around us, only broken by the ticking of the clock and Ashley's increasingly unsteady breathing. Her icy blue eyes darted from my lawyer to me, struggling to process the shattering of her confidence. I moved slowly to the sofa, sitting down gently as if this were nothing more than a casual conversation. But every movement radiated absolute control. I had waited for this moment, planned every detail, and now was the time to savor the unraveling of the betrayer. Ashley tried to summon her arrogance again, raising the paper in her hand like a last weapon. "This is the official transfer agreement. Mark signed it, confirming ownership. By law, this house belongs to him and of course to me." I smiled lightly, giving a casual shrug. "Really?" I glanced over at my lawyer, whose calm expression remained unshaken. He opened the thick folder, pulling out a stack of meticulously organized documents. "Ms. Ashley, correct?" he asked, his voice polite but sharp. She nodded, her eyes glued to the papers in his hands. He adjusted his glasses, his tone shifting to something firmer. "I think you need to take a closer look. According to the state's property laws, a transfer of ownership is only valid if the transferor actually owns the property. And I'm sorry to inform you." He paused, his gaze piercing through her. "Mark never owned this house." Ashley's perfect lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes widened, the smugness shattering like a delicate mask. "You're lying," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Mark told me he had transferred the ownership ages ago," he said. "Mark lied," I interrupted, my voice calm but as sharp as a blade. I rose to stand next to my lawyer, holding the official documents. "This house never belonged to Mark. It was mine before I even met him." I slowly unfolded each page, letting her see my name in bold print. "I inherited this house from my grandmother. There was no provision in the will allowing Mark any claim over it. And I never added his name to the title, no matter how many times he begged." The truth struck Ashley like a harsh slap. Her flawless legs wobbled, her once steady hands clutched the useless paper, as if it could save her. But now, it was nothing more than a worthless scrap. My lawyer closed the folder, his expression still cold and professional. "The documents you are holding will serve as evidence of Mark's attempted fraud. If necessary, we could press charges against both of you for conspiring to steal this property." All color drained from Ashley's face. She stumbled back, her eyes wild and desperate, like a trapped animal. Her arrogance was gone, leaving only fear and disbelief. I stepped closer, my gaze never leaving her pale face. "You played a big game, Ashley, but you chose the wrong opponent, and now, the game is over." I turned back, settled into the sofa, crossing my legs gracefully. I lifted my coffee cup, taking a small sip, savoring the bitter yet comforting taste. Because I knew I had won this match long before it even began. The fall of Ashley and Mark. The room fell into silence as Ashley stood there, her hands trembling as she clutched the worthless piece of paper. Her once proud blue eyes were now filled with horror and despair. The perfect world she had envisioned was crumbling right before her eyes. But I wasn't finished yet. I wanted her to feel the sting of betrayal, the helplessness of being played like a puppet, just as Mark had once done to me. I raised an eyebrow, my voice slow and chilling. "Would you like to call Mark? I think now is a good time for the two of you to have an honest conversation." Ashley flinched, her eyes widening, as if I had just made a crazy suggestion. But then she looked down at the paper in her hands, her lips trembling as she fought back tears. She knew the truth was crushing her, and there was only one person who could explain all these lies. Her hands shook as she dug through her purse and dialed Mark's number. The phone rang endlessly, its echo slicing through the tense silence. I crossed my arms and leaned against the window frame, calmly observing like an audience member watching a tragic play unfold. Finally, Mark's voice came through, smug and confident as always. "Hey babe, what's up?" Ashley's voice cracked as she screamed. "Mark, what did you tell me? You said this house was yours. You said I could move in and kick Sarah out, but you lied. This house was never yours." The smugness in Mark's voice disappeared instantly. I could hear the confusion and fear tangled in his words. "Wait. What? What are you talking about?" Ashley's voice wavered, tears choking her words. "Mark, her lawyer is here. She has all the papers proving the house belongs to her. You lied to me. You dragged me into your dirty little game." An ominous silence followed. I could easily imagine Mark's face, pale and contorted as he realized his entire scheme had collapsed. Finally, his voice returned, shaky but still trying to sound composed. "Babe, listen. I can explain. I just need some time to figure things out." But Ashley was no longer the naive doll Mark thought he could control. She exploded in fury, her anger roaring like a tornado. "Time? You had plenty of time to lie, to manipulate, and to make me look like a fool. I gave up everything for you, trusted you, and now I have nothing but a lying bastard and empty hands." I stood there, silently watching Ashley release all her pain and rage. I had once been in her position, trusting Mark unconditionally. But now I felt no pity or anger, only relief. Ashley turned to face me, her eyes flooded with defeat. "You knew all along, didn't you? You planned all of this." I shrugged, a cold smile touching my lips. "I didn't make you trust Mark. You chose to believe his lies." Her lips trembled as she let her phone slip from her hand. Mark's voice continued to whimper pathetically on the other end, begging and pleading in vain. But Ashley wasn't listening anymore. She had finally woken up. I stepped closer, my voice soft but razor-sharp. "Mark destroyed my life, but he didn't get to do it twice, and now he's doing it to you." Ashley broke down, her thin shoulders shaking as sobs racked her body. She staggered toward the door without another word. I didn't stop her. It was her choice, just as it had once been mine to walk away from Mark. As the door closed behind Ashley, I turned to my lawyer. He nodded, a satisfied smile crossing his otherwise stern face. "You've won, Sarah." I looked around my house, once a symbol of love and hope, now a battlefield of betrayal and intelligent revenge. But it was still mine. No one could take it away. No one could hurt me again. I smiled softly, peacefully. It wasn't about revenge. It was about living better. I walked to the window, gazing out at the bright blue sky. One chapter had ended, and a new one awaited. I was ready to move forward. Victory and growth of the protagonist. Standing by the window, the morning sun poured through the clear glass, painting the floor with a warm golden hue. The house was still mine, and that was all I needed to start over. Placing my hand on the windowsill, I looked out at the backyard that had witnessed so many memories of my now-ended marriage. Those painful memories no longer choked me. They were just lessons that made me stronger, smarter, and most importantly, made sure I would never let anyone control my life again. Mark had tried to take everything from me, my home, my stability, even my faith in love. But the only thing he truly lost was the chance to be with a woman who finally understood her worth. I had loved him sincerely, trusted him completely, and given him my all. But I was no longer that woman. I had risen from the ashes he left behind. I walked into my office and looked at the sign on the wall, Sarah's Boutique. The elegant handwriting symbolized the resilience and creativity I had reclaimed. Mark used to mock my dream of opening a fashion store, calling it a frivolous hobby. He never believed I could turn it into my own little empire. But now, I didn't just have one store. I had 3 thriving stores across the city. I rebuilt my life from my passion and my unwavering determination. Mark thought I would crumble after he walked away. He was wrong. I didn't just stand up. I soared higher than he could have ever imagined. That afternoon, I sat in my office, watching the steady stream of customers through the large glass window. The bell above the door chimed constantly, accompanied by laughter and satisfied smiles. I had created a space where people felt happy and confident, and that was something no one could take from me. My phone rang. It was my lawyer, informing me that Mark had lost the lawsuit completely. Not only had the court dismissed his claim to my property, but he was also ordered to pay all my legal fees. I smiled, a wave of relief washing over me. The battle was over, and I was the victor. But the sweetest victory wasn't defeating Mark, it was defeating my own doubts. I had overcome pain, betrayal, and despair to rediscover my true self. I looked at the mirror on the wall, a confident smile reflected back at me. The woman in the mirror was stronger, wiser, and fiercely independent. She had overcome it all and stood tall on her own 2 feet. I had won, not through vengeance or but by living well. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. A meaningful ending. Time flowed by like a quiet river. Mark vanished from my life, but his shadow lingered somewhere in old memories. Sometimes I wondered if he ever truly regretted what he did, or merely missed the control he once had. On a sunny Saturday morning, I was arranging new dresses on the display racks. Sarah's boutique had grown beyond my expectations, with 3 stores and a dedicated team. I had built a new family, not by blood but through love and respect. As I adjusted the sale sign, the doorbell rang, and Ashley walked in. She looked completely different. Gone was the arrogance, replaced by a humility I never thought I'd see. Ashley approached the counter, her hands clasped tightly, eyes cast downward. "Sarah? I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Her voice quivered, as if she had fought hard to say those words. I was silent, taking a moment before replying. I once despised this woman, hated the way she mocked me, hated how she walked into my home thinking she had won. But now, looking at her trembling shoulders, I realized she was no longer my enemy. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "I believed his lies. Mark told me you were cold, selfish, incapable of keeping a husband. I foolishly thought I could replace you. But in the end, I was just another pawn in his game." I saw the pain in her eyes, the betrayal I once knew all too well. She was just another victim of Mark's perfect lies. I sighed, the resentment I once held dissolving like smoke. "I was angry with you once, Ashley, but now I just feel sorry for both of us, for believing in him." Ashley's shoulders shook as she quietly wept. I stepped closer, placing my hand on her shoulder. "You broke free, and that's all that matters." She looked up, gratitude shining through her tear-filled eyes. "Thank you for showing mercy when you could have crushed me." I smiled softly and sincerely. "I was once in your place. I understand." As she walked out of my store, I felt a weight lift off my heart. Finally, I had let go of the past. I had won, not by taking everything from Mark, but by taking back my life. And that was the most powerful victory of all. A new chapter in life. That afternoon, as the golden sunlight began to dip below the horizon, and the last rays of the day streamed through the window, I sat in my favorite armchair at my store, sipping a warm cup of tea, quietly watching the bustling crowd outside. This sense of peace, I once thought I would never feel it again. Months had passed since I last heard anything about Mark. He had completely vanished from my life, like a storm that had passed, leaving behind ruins that I had meticulously cleaned up. I once believed I would hate him forever, but now, as it all lay behind me, I only felt emptiness. Emptiness, but also freedom. I rebuilt everything from the ground up, not to prove anything to Mark or anyone else, but to prove to myself that I could overcome anything. And now, looking back at the journey I had traveled, I realized I had accomplished so much more than that. The bell above the door chimed, pulling me out of my thoughts. Ashley walked in, this time with a genuine smile and a look of relief in her eyes. She had started over, found a steady job, and learned to stand on her own 2 feet. We didn't become best friends, but we learned to respect each other, as 2 women who were once broken but were now rebuilding their lives. "I just got promoted," she said, her smile radiant, eyes sparkling with pride. "I wanted to share this with you, because you gave me a chance to start over." I smiled back, feeling an unexpected warmth. Life is truly amazing. When you learn to let go, good things find their way to you. That evening, I closed the store later than usual. On my way home, I drove by the old street where Mark once lived with Ashley. The house was empty, its windows dark, no trace left of the luxurious life he once bragged about. I stopped the car, looked at it for a moment, and felt something strange. I felt nothing at all. No anger, no bitterness, not even a sense of victory. Just peace. I had moved past him, not by seeking revenge, but by moving forward. Looking back at the path I had taken, I realized that Mark wasn't the biggest loser. In fact, he taught me the most valuable lesson about resilience, about my own worth, and about never letting anyone define who you are. Mark lost everything, but I found myself. I turned the car around and drove away from that street without looking back. It would be the last time I ever passed by that place because the past was now behind me. I had closed that chapter, and I was ready to write a new one for myself. Driving across the big bridge, I felt the cool breeze against my face, carrying with it the scent of freedom. I hadn't just survived, I was thriving like never before. I learned to love myself, to cherish every moment, and to stand strong after falling. I didn't need revenge, because my greatest victory was finding peace. As my car glided through the busy city streets, I turned on the radio, letting the music fill the space. The cheerful melody mingled with the laughter of passers-by, making me feel lighter than ever. My life had truly begun anew. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone bring me down. A new chapter had begun. And I was writing it in my own way, strong, proud, and full of hope.